Friends, we have finally reached 0 hour, that is decision time. And last time I had told you the preparations that the US has made, but now I'm going to tell you what preparations Iran has made. It appears that Khamenei, the supreme leader, has decided that he'll go down fighting, that he's not going to surrender. And at 85, 86 years of age, he is not going to now backtrack and betray his revolution. For this purpose, he has now decided 4 layers of replacement for all his principal generals and administrators and governors. His effective chief of staff and commander-in-chief is Ali Larijani. Ali Larijani was a former IRGC commander, Revolutionary Guard commander. He was also 12 years the Speaker of the Parliament. He has been made the head of the Supreme National Security Council. All security-related matters as well as civilian matters have to go through him and not through the President Pezeshkian. That is, even Pezeshkian has to refer matters to Larijani. Larijani was responsible for the 25-year strategic partnership with China. He negotiated that deal. He's been negotiating with Qatar, Oman, and indirectly with the US as well, even though Araghchi, the foreign minister, is present for most of those meetings. In terms of purely military command, there is also General Ghalibaf. He is a kind of number 2. And then there is also Admiral Shamkhani. Admiral Shamkhani is in charge of the National Defense Council. The reports in the New York Times, Axios, etc. are that Iran has positioned its missiles both on the Persian Gulf in order to attack American bases and maybe even the oil installation of the Gulf Arab states, and also US ships, because Iran possesses lots of supersonic anti-ship missiles. In fact, Khamenei has said, to quote him, that no matter how strong the US is, they don't know what a hard slap they will receive. They won't be able to stand on their feet after that. So quite a lot of defiant rhetoric coming from Iran. Other missiles, long-range missiles, have been placed near the Iraqi border because that's closer to Israel. Apart from this, there is a second layer of attacks which Iran has planned through its proxies. That is through the Houthis in the Red Sea, through Iraqi militias, through Hezbollah. And then there is a third level. That is, American signals intelligence is picking up a lot of chatter about potential attacks against American assets, that is embassies, troops, etc. in Europe. For this purpose, Iran may use Hezbollah assets, or it may use even Al-Qaeda assets. Because Al-Qaeda's effective head, global head, Saif al-Adil, has been photographed in Iran. And in fact, even the UN Security Council Counterterrorism Committee had identified a few months ago that Al-Qaeda is planning attacks in Europe because it wants to re-establish its relevance. It also wants to get new recruits. So a big attack could happen in Europe as well. And finally, Iran seems to be giving indications that it will shut down Hormuz as well, the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's oil travels every day. This would increase economic costs for the Europeans and Americans, but of course it would have an effect on us in India as well. That is, oil price, which is around $65 a barrel right now, could shoot up beyond 100, even 150 or 200, depending on how long Hormuz stays closed. This would, of course, affect our economy, it would affect our stock market, it would affect our real estate markets. On the other side, news is coming from the White House as well. That is, some sources have told the New York Times that there was a meeting in the White House in the Situation Room in which Trump, the Vice President Vance, and the Secretary of State Rubio, who is also the National Security Advisor, were present, but along with them, 2 very important other people. That is the Chief of the CIA, Mr. Ratcliffe, and the Chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that is the Supreme General of all US forces. General Kane was present. And a lot of the questioning was being done by Vance. Vance did not make any objections to the attack, but he wanted to know what are the potential risks, what could be the potential costs, what could go wrong. And he kept questioning Kane and Radcliffe. Kane and Radcliffe did not give any yes or no answer on whether attack should happen. That is, they didn't want to take any political decisions, but they explained the cost, the benefits, etc. And it seems that they are not confident that a regime change can be undertaken just through air attacks. But the critical news is that Trump is considering a one-time strike short of regime change in order to inflict costs so that Iran agrees to the terms of the negotiation that the Americans want. And then if they still don't agree, then a few months later, a much larger attack, which would go for regime change. So what are the terms on which agreement or disagreement is happening? Well, Trump wants zero enrichment. And this has been reconfirmed by Witkoff only yesterday, who in a TV interview said that there are clear instructions from Trump to me and to Kushner, who's also a fellow negotiator, that nothing short of zero enrichment is acceptable. Now, this makes sense also because, as I explained earlier, Trump was very much against Obama's deal and when he got rid of it in 2018, he said this was the worst deal possible. In fact, during his campaigning in 2016, he had said that if he was in the room present when this deal was being negotiated, he would have walked away. To complicate matters further, as I explained earlier, Netanyahu is constantly whispering in Trump's ear that he would leave a huge legacy behind if he was to defeat Iran. It would completely change the map of the Middle East, and he would be remembered for decades, if not centuries, etc. So that is also weighing in the pressure of the Israel lobby. As I had explained to you earlier, that the Israel lobby wants basically every major power in the Middle East destroyed. It was they, along with the neocons, who urged Bush to attack Iraq. Israel was a big factor in not attacking Assad in 2013 during the red lines because Netanyahu didn't want Assad to be replaced by some strong leader. He wanted Syria to stay in civil war and weakened even after Ahmad al-Sharaa came to power. He wanted that neither the Kurds nor the Alawites nor the Druze should make peace with them so that Syria remains divided. And similarly, he wants Iran destroyed. In fact, it has been his ambition for decades. His whole career has been based on the fact that Iran should be eliminated as a threat. And even if this regime is eliminated, Iran should splinter. That is, the minorities, Baloch, Azari should separate, and a weakened Iran should be left behind, even if there is regime change. So that pressure is also there. And as you must have recently seen, there was a big interview between Tucker Carlson and Huckabee, America's ambassador to Israel, who's a fundamentalist evangelical Christian. And in his and other evangelical sects, there is a belief that for Jesus Christ to return to this earth, Israel must occupy all of historic Middle East. And he said, and the reason they wanted, according to their eschatology is the term that's used for end of times in theology. When Christ returns, when Jesus returns to this planet, he will eliminate all those who are non-believers, among whom the Jews also, by and large, the vast majority would be killed, and only a few thousand Jews would survive because they would convert to Christianity. So many of the Arab ambassadors have objected to this kind of public statements by a serving US ambassador. So Tucker Carlson disputed Huckabee in this interview, and this shows the rift in the MAGA base. So Trump has to be very careful because if he attacks and there are costs and repercussions, that is, if there are no costs, no US soldiers die, and there's just an air campaign, he may get away with it, he knows. But if Iran retaliates and US soldiers die, a few hundred of them or whatever, this could really lead to a backlash among Trump supporters, and the MAGA base could split between loyalists to Trump and those who are against him now because he's doing the same forever wars that they criticized Bush for doing earlier. So Trump is also in a bit of a fix. He's also in a fix because he had promised the Iranians that the protesters that go out and protest, I'm lock and loaded, I'm coming for your support. So if he doesn't turn up for their support and instead strikes a deal of which sanctions relief will be a critical part, it will be very difficult for him to go back. And how will he face those Iranian supporters in the diaspora, in the US, etc., who will say, how are you giving them sanctions relief? How are you striking a deal with them when they have killed 7,000 plus of the protesters? And as I have told you, that protests are still continuing. In fact, the last 2 days, the universities had opened in Iran, and there were huge protests both in Tehran, in universities there, and in universities in Mashhad, the second largest city in Iran. And today, on the third day, there are plans for protests even in Isfahan. So protests are continuing, and Trump is in a kind of fix, He's kind of cornered himself, where he doesn't want to attack because of his base, but he's being pushed because of his words and because of what he has said to the protesters in the past, to the Israelis, etc. So it's going to be very interesting how he negotiates this. A compromised position is also being suggested by the head of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is, of course, a UN body, who has suggested that, look, allow Iran only to refine for medical isotopes, that is, for medically useful radiation material, which is very, very low level. This will give a face saver to Iran as well. And Trump can also say that there are no weapons-grade uranium left or weapons factories left in Iran. But for this to be accepted, both Iran has to agree, Iran, which has already invested billions of dollars in its uranium refinement and enrichment program, and Trump also has to agree, because he has to be able to say that some enrichment is going to be allowed, even if it's at a very low level, which is contrary to the position he has taken since 2016-17 of zero enrichment, which was basically the Israeli position he adopted. So for this compromise to work out, and whether it works out or not will be clear within the next couple of days, possibly even the next couple of hours after you watch this. So keep watching, and I'll be back with the latest on this. So look forward to seeing you. Please like and subscribe the channel and share it if you can with your friends. See you again. Jai Hind.